What keeps me going. That hope is enough to get me out of bed every morning into my Scooby-Doo slippers.
I hear you, kid.
Of established
all the stories and also run down your election results.
And of course, look at the big 5-day forecast.
Join us tomorrow morning.
Jeopardy's
Her court date has been delayed until November
28 billion by the time Clinton's ads ran. The big Republican exaggeration.
$1 missing from the office.
Weekdays at 5 on News 5.
schedule lines.
Drug coverage.
P1
of low
Election day.
$6,000 more income under Clinton. Clinton's gasoline tax only cost the average family about $40 a year. Other Clinton taxes hit only the most affluent families. Accuracy and fairness still take a back seat in campaigns. As one ad maker put it, we're trying to win an election, not run a think tank. Judy?
All right, Brooks Jackson, thanks. Well, one of the states where they've been running some tough ads is North Carolina. The polls are about to close there in just a few minutes. Our own Natalie Allen is there at the headquarters of Senator Jesse Helms. Natalie, what news do you have to report?
Well, Judy, polls close in 3 minutes. The banjos are strumming. People are filling in here at Helms headquarters, and the Republican state leaders still tell us they predict a clean victory for Jesse Helms. They say voter turnout has been heavy in areas important to him. But just last night, Democratic challenger Harvey Gantt's people were almost giddy, feeling a surge in their candidate's chances. And think about that, a black Democrat unseating a conservative icon, Uncle Jess, as he is known in these parts, would be the political story of modern times in North Carolina. Back to the national desk.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and we'll be right back with more of our extensive coverage of Campaign 96 on this election night.
Closed captioning was provided by Bell Atlantic, the heart of communication.
Tonight on Larry King Live,
with rain on Sunday and Monday. That's your forecast. Now back.
Hey, at 6 feet 7 inches tall, I need a big car, and we have big cars at big savings. Lincoln Town Cars, Continentals, and Mark 8s. Hi, I'm Franklin Green at Quality Ford in West Des Moines.
And I'm Bob Biney. You are a big man, Frank, and these are real big deals on big cars, but everyone could use a small interest rate. So right now, select from these pre-owned luxury cars with only 7.9% interest.
7.9% interest. Come on down
to Quality Ford.
Your whatever it takes for a dealer, I-235 and 8th Street in West Des Moines, where our deals are real.
TCI for Business. Things have changed from just providing entertainment to the homes. Let's look at a TCI for Business charter account. The Wildwood offers, in addition to great service and terrific accommodations, video information services and digital music express to many of its rooms. In the very near future, look for telephony, data, and internet services. Stop by the Wildwood and see for yourself. Call for more information about what we can offer your business today, 246-2202.
Good evening, Lynn Russell, CNN Headline News. Election night 1996, and the politicians are awaiting the results of months of campaigning. The polls are just closing in 17 more states at this hour. And Chuck Roberts has the latest on the count so far. Chuck?
Thanks, Lynn. You know, I may regret to saying this a little later, but it looks like a great turnout tonight across the nation, at least among the states that the polls have closed. Some had complained the race isn't exciting, that it was a foregone conclusion, that it didn't catch the attention of the electorate, but the two main presidential candidates differ indeed on tax cuts, abortion, and central questions about the role of government in people's lives. And one of them, of course, will lead the country for the next 4 years. The incumbent Democrat Bill Clinton has been the front runner, which means the Republican challenger, Bob Dole, could stage the biggest upset since '48. Harry Truman reelected nearly a half-century ago over Tom Dewey. Here's looking at the polls as we have them right now. There's no, North Carolina is still undecided, 14 electoral votes in that state. Ohio is in play. Bill Clinton is not in play. Bill Clinton the winner in Ohio. He's also the winner in West Virginia with 5 electoral votes. And in Florida, earlier this evening, he's been declared the winner. 25 electoral votes, first time since '76. Florida's voted Republican. Still too close to call in Georgia. Polls closed about a half hour ago. New Hampshire will go for Clinton with 4 electoral votes. He also carried the state in '92. South Carolina is still too close to call with 8 electoral votes at stake. Vermont will go for Bill Clinton as it did in 1992, according to the estimate, 3 electoral votes. Virginia is still too close to call. The polls have been closed a half hour there as well. Indiana, still too close to call, but Mr. Dole has an early lead, 3 percentage points. Kentucky, it's neck and neck. Clinton and Dole 46-46, 8 electoral votes there. And of course, there are 270 needed to win. That's the map of Congress, what it would of the Senate, what would happen.
The Democrats. Senator Bob Smith, the Republican, seeking a second term, goes down to defeat. Dick Sweat, a former 2-term U.S. representative, has won the New Hampshire Senate seat. That's a pickup for the Democrats. Kentucky Senate, a hold on for the Republicans. Senator Mitch McConnell beats back the challenge of Lieutenant Governor Steve Beshear and therefore holds on to this seat for the GOP. That makes our map for the Senate seats look as follows. Remember, 34 seats up for grabs tonight. The Democrats have to win 18 on the night of the 34 in order to get control of the Senate. So far tonight, the Democrats have picked up 2, and the Republicans have picked up 2. The Republicans have won South Carolina and Kentucky in the Senate races. Now, Ohio and history are going against Bob Dole at this hour. This could be a pivotal part of the presidential election story tonight when we get Ohio falling in line for Bill Clinton. Ed Bradley?
Well, it's in there for Bill Clinton, and the reason, as we've seen in much of the country, is the economy, the pocketbook issues coming through once again. You take a look at the voters and how they feel in Ohio. Those who thought that the economy and jobs was the number one issue, President Clinton picked up 60% of those voters. Those who, the second most important issue was Medicare and Social Security. He picked up 65% of those voters. And also in a state where you had a very popular Republican governor who was elected with 72% of the vote in the last election campaign.
Houses are supposed to be equal, but the Senate thinks of itself as a little bit superior. So now we have a son-in-law who will lord it over his father-in-law if he dares.
Well, okay, Sam, thanks very much. I just want to add, you've just caught us so off balance down here that...
well, I'll be glad to continue to talk.
I don't doubt it for a second. Real change in New Hampshire, because we're now also projecting that New Hampshire is going to have a Democratic governor. Governor Steve Merrill, the Republican, is retiring in New Hampshire, and if we can get our governor's board up there, possibly, we now project that Jeanne Shaheen, who's a 3-term state senator, is going to be the new governor of New Hampshire, and no Democrat has been elected governor of New Hampshire in 16 years. Her opponent there, Ovid Lamontagne, has never held elective office, but there are 2 Democrats doing well in New Hampshire tonight, where 4 years ago you would not have expected such a thing. Now, just to remind you that in terms of the presidential race at the moment, there are several races too close to call. Let me just list them: Indiana, Kentucky, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina. Why might they be too close to call? We turn now to our first guest from outside our headquarters this evening, the former governor of South Carolina, former Governor Carroll Campbell. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Why do you think at this point so much in the South is too close to call?
Well, I think you have to realize that both Bill Clinton and Al Gore were Southerners, and as such, they had some influence on other races. But in South Carolina, Bob Dole will win South Carolina. Strom Thurmond's winning South Carolina. And I think the same will hold true in North Carolina over time, even though they're close now. But the Democrats made a very concerted effort in the South this time, and as such, they challenged areas they hadn't challenged before. And the Republican base did not have a Southerner particularly involved, even though we worked very hard. And if you look at it, I think what you see is some issues that have come into play. Obviously, the Medicare issue came into play in Florida. It was demagogued very, very strongly by the Clinton campaign, and as such, I think it took its toll on some of these areas. So,
let me interrupt you just for a second there,
yes,
Governor.
sir.
Why do you think the Republicans were never very successful at almost any level in fighting back on the Medicare issue?
Well, I don't know. My concern with that is that they didn't take it on early enough. Medicare was something that needed to be fixed, and there's no question And Bill Clinton proposed to slow the growth, and the Republicans proposed to slow the growth, but Bill Clinton had the bully pulpit, and he could command the national press, and as such, I think that unfortunately, he got out a message that resonated, even though it was unfortunate because he knows full well that something has to be done.
Governor Campbell, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank
Governor
you.
Campbell, who it was responsible in many ways for saving Bob Dole in the primary season with a very organized Republican Party in South Carolina. On the subject of Florida, by the way, about which we've spoken already, ABC projecting Florida for President Clinton. We're told by someone who has spoken with the president tonight that he, Mr. Clinton, is ecstatic about winning Florida, and well, he might be. We'll be back in just a moment.
This is the 96 vote with Peter Jennings, David Brinkley, and Cokie Roberts, Sam Donaldson, Lynn Scher, Jeff Greenfield, and Michelle McQueen. ABC News coverage will continue in a moment.
The AFL-CIO spent $35 million on a so-called nonpartisan educational campaign that was in fact aimed at defeating at least 30 Republican congressmen all around the country. Some of those congressmen were pounded for more than a year by the labor union ads that accused them of trying to cut Medicare, trying to cut education. You were just talking about Ohio. In Ohio, 3 of the Republican congressmen had the labor unions spending $1 million apiece against them. Now, right at the end, the business community and the Republicans poured in their millions of dollars to counter the labor ads, calling them labor bosses. So it's hard to say which of the ad campaigns would affect the voters in the final analysis. But if the Democrats take the House of Representatives, they will owe a big debt of gratitude to the labor unions. And if the Republicans, on the other hand, hang on to the House, the labor unions are not going to be facing friendly faces in Washington. Dan?
Thank you very much, Linda. And fair to say that where the unions tried to have their biggest influence was, A, in defeating the freshman Republican House members, those who were facing up for re-election the first time. That's where Labor really put its emphasis. And with us now is John Sweeney, president of the AFL-CIO. Mr. Sweeney, do you have information on how the race for control of the House is going? Ours is that it's way too early to say. If you had to guess, how do you guess?
Well, I think it is too early to say, but I think that we're going to elect a number of candidates who have identified with working family issues, and that's what this campaign was all about.
Now, you poured at least $30 million into the Democratic campaigns. What do you expect to get for your money?
Well, we hope that we'll get a Congress that will be responsive to America's working families and not be dealing with a radical contract for America.
If there was one Republican that you wanted to defeat, really defeat this year, the AFL-CIO, whom would that be?
Oh, I would rather not identify any individuals, but I hope that we can have a Congress that we can hold accountable on the issues that our members and working families are so concerned about, and those are the broad issues that we have identified during this campaign, and I believe that we're going to see a more responsive Congress on those issues.
Was there not one single Republican candidate worthy of being backed by union labor this year?
Oh, there were a number of Republican candidates who were backed by labor unions in their particular area. In some of the moderate Republicans' districts, the labor movement was split, and local unions were supporting Republican candidates.
Now, the Republicans say that union labor is just another special interest, just another one of the, quote, Democratic bosses. Pretty hard to argue with that.
Well, if representing working families in this country is a special interest, I'm happy to be a part of it.
Now, President Clinton has had pretty good luck moving to the right. Do you approve of that?
I think the president has been very responsive on the issues that workers are interested in, and I believe that he is a pro-worker president.
Mr. John Sweeney, president of the AFL-CIO, who's brought labor back big time as an influence in election campaigns. Thanks for being with us. Let's go to our cyber set now and CBS News correspondent Harry Smith. Harry, what do people think about all that money spent on campaigns? Is it worth it?
Well, I'll tell you what, they are not happy about this money being spent. And of course, you've been talking about money spent on congressional campaigns. We asked folks today about spending millions and millions, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on the presidential campaign. This is actually a poll that we did about a week or so ago, and take a look at this. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on the presidential campaign. Do folks around America think it's worth it? Absolutely not. Both parties have spent a lot of lip service saying we're going to campaign reform, finance reform, and everything else, but do they do it? No. They ought to look at some of these poll numbers. Here's another one that we found particularly interesting, Dan. Through the conventions this summer, through the free TV time, through the paid TV time, through C-SPAN and newspapers and the evening news every night, have you learned anything from the campaign over the last couple of months? And the answer, 3-1, is absolutely not. Dan?
Thanks, Harry. Here's the way our CBS News Electoral College map looks. 58 electoral votes for Bill Clinton, including Florida, 0 for Dole so far, 270 electoral votes needed to win. The states of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, and Indiana, too close to call in the presidential election. The Electoral College vote. Let me show you what's going to happen at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, we have 17 states plus the District of Columbia. They are going to come up, all of these states. That'll be at 8 o'clock, 17 states, the District of Columbia, over 200 electoral votes at stake when we come to the top of the hour. That's why we remind you to stick in here. Now, we have the following states, Florida, New Hampshire, Vermont, West Virginia, they have fallen to President Clinton. However, when this top of this next hour, all of these states with some 200 electoral votes are going to fall. Will this be the hour of decision? Will this be the hour when you can say President Clinton has been reelected or not? That's the reason we want you to stay in here and stay tuned with us. Our CBS News coverage will be right back.
Last time you played in the rain. Let your hair go wild.
Has been reelected, we say, and that means a net gain of 1 for the Republicans so far. Now, I'm not great at sports analogies, but this is really not even the first quarter of the game here. This is about the first 5 minutes, so we will be changing these net gains up and down all night long until we get to the very end. And the reason for that is these Republican freshmen that we have talked so much about throughout the course of this campaign. They came in like a house of fire 2 years ago, taking the Congress for the Republicans for the first time since Dwight Eisenhower did it again. And they are endangered. There's 71 of them as opposed to only 17 Democratic freshmen. And so those are the people we'll be watching to see whether the Democrats can get the House back.
Now, let's see if you and I can agree here, because I'm trying to change my numbers to correspond with yours here. What do the Democrats need in terms of a net gain to control the House?
The reason these numbers vary is that there are some seats the Democrats already have lost and some they've already gained. So we're going to go, if we're going to use the number 198 Democratic old seats, that means they need 20, because you need 218 to have a majority. So let's say 20.
Okay. Thank God of that. It's a round figure. Now, I want to talk a moment about two very important voting blocks at the moment. First of all, the Perot voters. This is actually the first time tonight we have mentioned Mr. Perot, other than that he was the first to cast his ballot of the presidential candidates today and told everybody that they should vote their conscience. But the Perot voters, and then after that I want to talk to Jeff Greenfield about the Reagan Democrats. But first, let's go into virtual reality. And Lynn, sure, tell us what the Perot voters have had on their minds today.
Peter, I'll tell you about the Perot voters in just a moment, but I want to tell you about two other groups. You've called Ohio for President Clinton. One of the reasons President Clinton held on to Ohio was the union vote. Everybody is aware how much time and energy and money the unions have spent in this election. Let's take a look and see what happened in Ohio. In that state, a third of the voters said that they came from union households. How did they vote? Well, take a look. 58% said they voted for Bill Clinton, only 32% for Bob Dole. So, as you can see, the Union doing very well for Bill Clinton in Ohio. Georgia, which you're saying is too close to call, one reason could very well be the religious right. People who identify themselves as members of the religious right account for about 22% of the voting population in Georgia today. And if Bob Dole wins Georgia, it could very well be because of them. Here's why. Right now, those who say that they are members of the religious right, 11% voting for Bill Clinton, 79% for Bob Dole. That is really huge. Now, the Perot voters. You will recall 19% 4 years ago. Our tracking polls all along have showed that Ross Perot has been way down 5%, 6%, 7%. Where are those voters going? Let's take a look. Of those who voted for Ross Perot in 1992, Bill Clinton's getting about 23%. And take a look at this. Bob Dole is getting twice as many, 46%. Ross Perot holding on to about 29% of his 92 voters. That's something we will watch throughout the rest of the evening. Peter?
Just help me understand this, then. There's no way for us at the moment to tell how many people are voting Ross Perot, or percentages even, right?
Well, we know, but in an awful lot of these states, the polls have not closed, so we can't call any of we can't announce any of these things. We do know to some extent what's going on. What's most important, though, is that he is not holding on to his vote. He's getting less than a third of the vote that he got 4 years ago.
Okay, thanks very much, Lynn Scher. We'll come back to you before long. Jeff Greenfield, we were talking a little while ago, Jeff, about Reagan Democrats and where they might go this year.
Yes, Peter, if you're in Republican headquarters tonight, you're hearing the song The Way We Were. There was a time 15, 20 years ago, it actually started with Nixon. We came to call them Reagan Democrats in places like Ohio, Michigan, other Midwestern states. Blue-collar Democrats who'd moved to the suburbs, were driven away from the Democratic Party or pulled away first on social issues like crime, welfare, busing, then pulled away on economic issues, on Reagan's tax cut plan. Bill Clinton worked in 1992 harder than anything else to get those suburban traditional Democrats back. He got them back in 1992. He apparently, at least in a state like Ohio, held them tonight. And as we watch the industrial Midwest particularly, as we get to Michigan and Illinois later, as we get to New Jersey, those Reagan Democrats coming home may wind up being the central story about why Bill Clinton may be doing as well as he is doing so far in these big industrial states.
Jeff, I know you've also been looking at the Florida vote here. There are a couple of crucial elements in the Florida vote that worked for Mr. Clinton, the elderly and to some extent the Cuban community.
Yes, and the Cuban community, Bill Clinton ran to the right of George Bush on Cuba, which is hard for a Democrat to do in 1992. He cultivated the Cuban exile vote, and there's one more point. In many places beside Dade County, which is Miami, it's not just the elderly vote. Lots of younger people, lots of soccer moms, to use this wretchedly overused phrase.
Please.
And I know, that's the last time, I promise, I swear, have moved down to Florida, to places like Orlando and boom towns. And the Clinton people told me a month ago that they were committing a lot of the money. They spent something like $3 million in advertising in Florida.
Reverend Robinson, 2 years ago, the word among the insiders, and I quote now, the Christian coalition can flat out deliver votes. It looks like a very different picture here in 1996.
Well, not really, Dan. I think the coalition has been the firewall between winning and losing as far as conservatives in the House. The freshman class of Republicans were supposed to be an endangered species. Most of them are being reelected. So with a few cases like Bob Smith, which I'm sorry to see defeated in New Hampshire, we're looking at maybe a pickup of 4 seats in the South, and that's a primarily evangelical area of the country. We're looking at Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, and Clinton's home state of Arkansas. Tim Hutchinson looks like he's going to win tonight.
Reverend, abortion, school prayer, same-sex marriage, all of these are issues very important to you, but they became almost invisible and not heard of on the campaign. Why was that?
Well, I think that Dole's advisors, he's got the same group in a sense that were advising Bush in '92. They studiously avoided television advertising, which pointed to the moral dilemma in our country, and consequently, he never did mobilize his base. You know, Bush won 83% of the evangelicals in 1988, and he won handily over Dukakis. But they muted those issues in '92. They muted them again in '96, and they lost, and they will lose every every time that a national candidate does not address these things. If they play into the economy when the economy was as good as it is now, they're making a dreadful mistake. And I think that's what we tried to convey to the Dole campaign, and they just wouldn't listen to us.
Thank you very much, Pat Robertson. Good to be with you again. Let's take a look at our Senate map. 34 Senate seats up tonight. The Democrats need to win 18 if they're to regain control of the Senate. So far, they've picked up 2. The Republicans have picked up 2. We don't know much about how the outcome of the House races. It's going to be a while before we know that. We are reminding you that we're watching those House races, all of them all across the country, very, very carefully. Joining us again, our political analyst, Kevin Phillips. Kevin, what about the influence of the, quote, Christian right?
Well, I think it's very substantial, and I think it was quite revealing that Pat Robertson was talking
Des Moines. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Lena.
And News 5's Don Taylor is live in Dallas County. He is covering, of course, that riverboat casino referendum.
That's right. And Don, this was an emotional issue for voters. Is there any idea on how they were swayed one way or the other?
Well, if you ask Casino America, the big issue was that they were going to put a lot of money into this county throughout the next few years because of the casino. Now, opponents say no matter how much money you throw in, there's still going to be problems with having a casino here in Dallas County. We're going to be hearing from people on both sides of this issue.